Doctor, very good afternoon to you, and thank you for speaking with us. Let's begin then with the very importance of the return of these artifacts. Why is it so crucial?
Thank you. I think the importance of returning these artifacts has a lot to do with making justice to our history, African history, because the circumstances in which these artifacts were collected and are displayed and used in many ways dehumanizes and also dehumanize our humanity and also perpetuated the colonial misrepresentation of Africa as having no history. So it is really a matter of sovereignty, a matter of claiming back our history, not just the history, but the ability to interpret and tell our own history to the world. So because of this colonial and after colonialism illicit circumstances through which these artifacts are collected, it is really important that this repatriation be the principle we need to consider when we talk about African collections in the West.
Many of these artifacts, Doctor, are spread right across the various parts of Europe. Is there accurate enough records of just how much was taken from Africa, be it during war times or at the height of colonialism?
Yes, that is a very good question, and partly the problem and also the dishonesty about collecting and holding these artifacts in the West is the lack of accurate record of how many artifacts or how many human remains or how many other important treasures are held in the West. For example, recently the V&A Museum in London had organized an exhibition to show artifacts collected from Ethiopia in 1868. We know from historical records that 15 elephants and 200 mules were used to transport the loot out of Ethiopia up to the port. That means there's a large collection of items taken. The British Museum alone took 350 written Ethiopian manuscripts and a lot more, including a replica of the Ark of the Covenant called the tabots, which are sacred objects of the Ethiopian indigenous church, still in the museum. Now, a lot of these items are not really known or be given for the people who belong to. So we don't really know the exact amount of these artifacts. They call them artifacts. We should not necessarily call them artifacts because some of these items are really living sources of knowledge, tradition. If you take the Ethiopian manuscripts, as I mentioned earlier, these manuscripts are textbooks that could have been used in the traditional education system in Ethiopia. And others as well, human remains in some places, there's still an ongoing debate on that, is important as part of healing historical trauma that happened because the dead has to be buried in a spiritual and traditional way. So there are a lot of a large amount of or number of artifacts called artifacts are being said to have existed in many museums, but we don't really have a definite number that shows how much or how many.
I want to pick up, Doctor, on the point you made about the return of human remains. In South Africa, around 2002, we managed to get the return of the remains of Sarah Baartman, whose body was paraded across much of Europe. It eventually made its way home. How much attention is the return of human remains getting, and is it not made even more complicated by the fact that a lot of the Africans who were taken from the continent were taken either as slaves or through other undocumented means?
Yes, that is a very good case, and I think that the story of Sarah is a very good indication of what happened or how Africans were represented, treated in the West. You can consider the controversy that took place when the request was made by President Mandela to return her remains to South Africa. It wasn't an automatic response to say yes. A similar case of a Botswana man's body, which was displayed for 170 years in a Spanish museum. And that also led to a significant controversy because some people, at least, they're saying that this is part of their national treasure. So in a sense, there is this tendency to have a sense of ownership on African, be it human remains or other artifacts. And the importance of repatriation is reclaiming back that history. It's not to say that these things should exist in the way they were displayed and represented by the West. It is actually a way of having the agency to tell the place of these items. We may not necessarily put these items all in museums. Some may go to different places, to spiritual worship places like the Tabot in the museum, would go to the churches in Ethiopia. The human remains may be buried. So this is a very essential question of being human, being tellers of our own story. And the importance of Sara is also the controversies that arise really do not take into account the importance of reverting and telling our own history and claiming back our dignity. It's really an important question to consider for all Africans when you think about decolonization, when you think about telling who we are as Africans. The most effective weapon of colonialism was the destruction of our history, African history. With the destruction of history comes the destruction of knowledge and the reinvention or recreation of new knowledges. And by learning those new knowledges, which do not come from our experience and tradition, we start to invent a new type of identity that is not our own. So this process of reclaiming these things is not to get existing artifacts or items, but it is a question of telling who we are and decolonizing ourselves, our history, tradition, and so on.
Dr. Yirga Woldeyes, a very important conversation, and you're clearly very passionate. We'll hopefully be able to have you on for a longer discussion at a later date. For now, thank you.